Hello everyone, Martin here, back with part 3 of this Doomsday tutorial. Thanks so much for tuning in and commenting and all that stuff on the other two videos. This is going to be probably the second to last. I think I'm going to do a part 4 as well. So in this part 3, I want to talk about the some of this from a sort of conceptual point of view, the strengths and the weaknesses of playing Turbo Doomsday or any sort of Legacy Doomsday deck, really. Um, the usual caveats here. I'm just like one person. These are my thoughts. Not completely unfiltered, but do go and seek out other resources to get other like angles on this deck. And the other one, I think I forgot to say in the part two, is like I'm aiming this for the uninitiated, more or less. So if you are well versed in Legacy Doomsday, please, you can feel free to hang out and watch this video. But you might not find a whole lot of new things that you didn't already know. All right, so what are the strengths of Legacy Doomsday? Why would you play this deck? Well, first of all, the combo is just very, very compact. This is one of the only like quote unquote one card combos, which is to say, if you have the 3 black mana to cast Doomsday, then you don't need an A plus B. You don't need Show and Tell plus Emrakul, or Sneak Attack plus Gristlebrand, or Entomb plus Reanimate. So that is one of the key ways in which it differentiates itself from many other spell-based combo decks in Legacy that are either an A plus B combo or an A plus B plus C combo. That might be Show and Tell Omniscience Cunning Wish or Show and Tell Omniscience Emrakul. Obviously, you often play this in conjunction with Dark Ritual, and then we can always just debate like, does that make it a 2 card combo or a 1 card combo or whatever. But the thing is, you only need you have the 4 Doomsdays, and you only need some other couple of other key pieces, like one being at least 1 copy of Thassa's Oracle. But what that means is you get to not dedicate that many spaces to your combo, and you can then instead have a whole lot of disruption, like a lot of counter spells, discard. You can play Veil of Summer, and you also have room for all the cantrips, all of the good ones, anyways. That is, I think, a very appealing sort of aspect of the deck. And another appealing aspect for me is that you get to play Force of Will. This, I think, is a pretty significant dichotomy of like Legacy deck. Can you or can you not play Force of Will? It's not the be all end all. Like I for instance played A&T, Ad Nauseam Tendrils, for many years, a spell based combo deck that notoriously does not get to play Force of Will, and that deck is still great. And the Epic Storm is great, and Dredge is great. Like you can name combo decks that don't get to play Force, and that those decks are still great. But getting to play Force of Will, at least in my mind, is a significant advantage, because it means that you get to be a control deck when you're not on when it's not your turn, and that is important in combo mirrors. That is important when you're up against different shenanigans where people are trying to ruin your day. So Force of Will is sort of like the police, like the cop on patrol in the Legacy format, and it's a definite advantage to be able to play it. And the reason why we can play it and some other decks can't, well, first of all, obviously it's the blue count. You need enough blue cards. Occasionally, Doomsday, I think, can suffer um, when there are builds that get dangerously close to a low blue count for Force of Will. But generally speaking, you can get where you want to be. And then secondly, like, yes, we have a Lion's Eye Diamond, but unlike Storm decks, um, a lot of the time we aren't using the our Lion's Eye Diamonds before we go off. We have 1 diamond, and we use it when we believe the coast is clear and we can win on the same turn. So it's not the same sort of non-bow that you would find in Storm combo decks, for instance, where like you have like Infernal Tutor as your payoff, and then if your protection spell is Force of Will, then it's never going to work because you need to put LED or sorry, Infernal Tutor on the stack and then crack LED, losing your Force of Will and blue card. So yeah. This is also not a storm deck, so it doesn't need to count to 10. It doesn't need spell saturation. So, like in storm combo, it's more of a detriment to lose two cards in your hand to for one storm, and sometimes you won't even be able to use it because your opponent doesn't put a spell on the stack, and you don't feel like forcing one of your own spells. Anyways, so that's another thing, and then yet another strength, I think, compared. I'm going to be comparing to Storm because I think they are so very comparable. Like Dark Ritual, blue black base, spell based combo decks. Another advantage is what I was just going from here is that you don't need to count to 10, so you don't necessarily need to string together multiple spells in the same turn. It is very very doable to beat cards like Mind Break Trap or Deafening Silence slash Aethersworn Canonist. And that is all in no small part thanks to the cyclers. I talked about this at another point, which is what the thing I talked about was that if we had access to Gitaxian Probe and Legacy still, it would fit very well into this deck. Obviously, it would. But when it comes to beating that kind of hate, like number of cards that are bothered with number of spells cast in the turn, or cards like Trinisphere that add like mana to every like 3 mana to every free spell, basically. Then being able to draw cards when you're not without actually casting a spell, putting a spell on the stack is huge. It is like the world is rife with Twitter screenshots of Doomsday players like saying you won the match and their opponent having like Trinisphere, Chalice on 1, Chalice on 2, blah blah blah, Thalia Guardian of Thraben, and you still won because these cyclers just don't care about that sort of stuff. And Cavern of Souls can handily beat a Chalice on 2, by the way, and that does come up. You should never. I think you should always be very careful and considerate when thinking about boarding out Cavern of Souls in a Chalice of the Void matchup. Um, okay, so those are like the core strengths of this deck, I believe. So let's talk about what are the weaknesses. Okay, so there are a few, and the first one I want to touch on is the life total dependency. Doomsday, losing you half your life total is very very significant. This is basically much of the reason why Doomsday decks typically struggle against like tempo strategies because tempo decks are often decks that have creatures that come down fast and can deal significant points of damage. They sometimes have, and quite often I would say have access to Lightning Bolt, and they have a bunch of counter spells. So that combination, like Doomsday, can beat counter spells. If you're up against a slow blue control deck, you're the favorite. You're not going to win every time, but I think you're the favorite because you have so much like counter spells for yourself, and especially like Daze can punish early, or can be punishing the early game. Anyways, but if you only quote unquote have to beat like aggro slash burn, that's also somewhat doable. It's much more doable now than I think in the olden days when Doomsday was slower. When we had to like win with the Tendrils of Agony kill. This is like way back when. But still, I would say you don't really want to face burn because they are just like they're so effective at dealing damage to you, and the fact that you will eventually at some point have to deal a bunch of damage to yourself to win, it's not ideal. So being life total dependent is a thing. It's a problem. It's something to be mindful of. You you have you have to be mindful of, can my opponent present any haste damage next turn, for instance, if you're considering passing the turn. Um, so back in this is also like some point back in the day, like when your opponent when Oko Thief of Crowns was legal, like making Doomsday pass a turn, and then they going like, oh, Oko, make my Arkham's Astrolabe into a 3/3 attacker for 3. The sort of haste lightning bolt of Oko. That sometimes just was GG's. All right, so that's one weakness. All right, the second weakness, to me, to my mind at least, is like any kind of turbo Doomsday at least has an extremely greedy mana base. Look at this one I've pulled up here. This is a Demure, straight Demure, so no third color splash. And still, like we have one basic land in the whole pile of cards. We have 6 lands that can be fetched. One basic land, 5 underground seas effectively, 1 water grave, 4 seas. This is a mana base that's going to get punished heavily by a Blood Moon. Blood Moon slash Magas of the Moon is one of the ways we most easily lose to like stompy strategies. And it only gets worse, I would say, when you splash other colors. But that's just a fact of wanting to resolve a BBB spell in your sort of almost mono blue deck. That also means we're vulnerable to Wasteland. Most decks in Legacy, or many decks, I should say, are vulnerable to Wasteland, and this is no exception. That's also why, again, the tempo decks are such a nuisance. Be careful when building past the turn piles. If your opponent can possibly put a moon effect into play. That's one of the easiest ways to lose versus Blood Moon. And sometimes it's just too like it's like really impossible, right? You if you want to build a pile with like 2 lotus petals, you'll lose to Chalice on 0 or Chalice on 2. If you want to put a pile with like Cavern of Souls, then you lose to Blood Moon. So yeah, that can be tricky. All right, and where we were strong versus certain types of hate, like Mindbreak Trap and Canonists, and you can argue they can still certainly do damage to you. We are vulnerable to like other types of hate, like Endurance, Dress Down, Narset, like things that can somehow turn off Thassa, like Torpor Orb and Dress Down, or Humility even, God forbid. Things that can tuck stuff into your library again, like Endurance or Thran Foundry, and then things that care about drawing cards. That is that is a thing that we Doomsday don't really ever want to see Narset Parter of Veils resolve, for instance. Orcish Bowmasters is also a bit of a problem, but can, like, depending on when it enters, if your life total is above 5, then you should like post Doomsday, you should be able to win right there, and then even through a Bowmasters. But it can definitely punish you. Shoulder it, obviously a nightmare, Hull Breacher, like those types of effects, would be a mild disruption to no disruption at all if you were playing Ad Nauseam Tendrils or the Epic Storm. But for us, they can be pretty crippling. And I think what this means, and that could probably be transposed to any like any spell-based combo deck, is that if someone showed up at your LGS or at the GP you're attending, just hell bent on not losing to Doomsday, then they are likely not going to lose to you, because they like if your opponent is playing like main deck Endurance and Dress Down, have more to bring in the sideboard, plus like Deafening Silence, and a lot of counter spells, then it's not unbeatable obviously, but it just means that we are a quite linear strategy. There is like we need to put Doomsday on the stack most of the times anyways, and that means that people can, if they really want to, they can combat us quite effectively. All right, I think that's probably what I'm gonna leave it with today, and then in the next, and what I think is going to be the final video, I'm going to talk about how to approach sideboarding. Now, it's not going to be like a sideboard map. I'm not going to go matchup by matchup or anything, but just more from an archetypical point of view, like what different meta like archetypes in the metagame should you be aware of, and what tools do we have to fight them with, and obviously also like what do the different splash colors bring. All right, well, I mean, I hope that was fun. I'm going to be back with some more Legacy content as soon as I can, and until then, stay safe and have a good one. Bye bye.